Who could have imagined that in just 20 years, bloodthirsty zombies would actually evolve intelligence? When they attack survivor communities now, they no longer rush in blindly like before. Instead, they strike strategically, first taking out the most troublesome target of all, the lights. Our main character, Martin, is a direct victim of this brutal shift. When the zombie outbreak first began, his entire family was slaughtered by the monsters. But through that tragedy, Martin met the man who would change his life forever, Mr. Under Mr.'s guidance, Martin slowly learned how to survive in the Wasteland. And just when he had fully adapted to the end of the world and found a like-minded partner to share his life with, Mr. once again chose to walk away alone. Carrying a quiet sense of loss, Martin traveled north with his girlfriend and settled down in a remote human settlement. Before long, the two welcomed a lovely child into the world, and for the next 10 years, they lived the happiest days of their lives. But in this world, disaster never comes with a warning. One night, a massive horde of infected stormed the settlement. Leading them was a female zombie with clear, focused eyes, proof that she possessed a frightening level of intelligence. Even more unsettling was the fact that humans were mixed in among the attackers. Together, they slaughtered everyone in the settlement, Martin's wife and child included. Martin survived only because he was out hunting that night. When he returned, he collapsed to his knees before the cold bodies of his family, overwhelmed by grief. In that moment, Martin swore an oath. No matter the cost, he would avenge his fallen family and companions. But Martin knew one thing very clearly. There was no way he could pull this off alone. The first person who came to mind was his mentor, Mr. Yet the moment Martin stepped outside the settlement, he realized just how much the world had changed. Compared to 10 years ago, the land had become even more desolate. He walked for an entire day without seeing a single living soul. What shocked him even more was the infected themselves. Creatures that once feared sunlight were now roaming around in broad daylight. Their movements were slower, but compared to 10 years ago, this was a terrifying leap forward. Martin had no idea where Mr. was now. But one thing he was certain of, Mr. was never the type to stay hidden. If he was still alive, he would be somewhere relatively populated. So Martin pushed on, traveling day and night, heading south without stopping. After roughly half a month on the road, he finally reached a human settlement. Martin remembered this place well. 10 years ago, he and his mentor had passed through here, back when it was loud, crowded, and full of life. But now, only ruined buildings remained, and there wasn't a single soul in sight. Forcing himself to swallow the disappointment, Martin found a motorcycle and used it as transportation. With that, his speed increased dramatically. Before long, he came across a farmhouse. He planned to spend the night there, but just as he approached, an infected stepped out. Martin was about to draw his bow and release an arrow, when someone else struck first. To his surprise, a pair of elderly couples were still living there. This was the first time Martin had seen living people since leaving the settlement. And clearly, the old couple hadn't had visitors in a very long time either. They actually brought out the last of their food to treat him. Martin found it strange that they weren't eating with him. When he asked, the couple exchanged awkward looks and kept insisting they weren't hungry. Martin assumed they were simply too stingy to touch their remaining supplies. But after finishing a bowl of oatmeal, a sudden wave of dizziness hit him. The old man's expression darkened as he kept muttering the same sentence over and over, that he hadn't eaten meat in a very long time. The next second, the old woman charged in, knife in hand. Martin spun around and dodged cleanly. The old man panicked and opened fire, but the bullet struck his own wife instead. He rushed to her side in shock, desperately checking on her. And that's when he felt a cold flash across his skull. Using the last of his fading consciousness, Martin swung his blade. When morning came, Martin woke up from unconsciousness. The world in front of him felt strange and unfamiliar, almost impossible to adjust to. He later entered another settlement. Just like the last one, it was completely deserted. But over the loudspeakers, a broadcast kept looping, a recruitment message from something called the Brotherhood. Martin was focused on scavenging for supplies, not realizing that a clerk was still standing there. Without hesitation, Martin pulled out the sketch of his mentor. The shop clerk recognized Mr. immediately. Around here, Mr. was famous, a well-known zombie hunter. But when Martin asked where he'd gone, the clerk's eyes started to drift. After some hesitation, he guessed that Mr. might have headed to an old brick factory nearby. Martin had stayed inside the settlement for a full 10 years. He had no idea how much the outside world had changed. Following those directions, he eventually reached the brick factory. The moment he arrived, a filthy little girl walked straight toward him. In the very next second, Martin was knocked unconscious by a blow to the head. When he finally woke up, he was quickly dragged into a large tent camp. There, people were openly cutting up human flesh. and even the children watching showed nothing but cold, emotionless stares. Suddenly, loud cheers and shouting erupted around him. Martin was forced into an arena. Inside a cage nearby, an infected creature was being held. All around him, crowds screamed and roared in excitement. At some point, human death matches had become the most popular form of entertainment. But the host shouted excitedly that today would be different. There would be no human versus infected fight. Instead, a very special event had been prepared. At the host's signal, Martin watched in shock as his opponent stepped out. It was his mentor, Mr. But before Martin could warn him, Mr. charged forward, swinging his fists without hesitation. So much had changed in 10 years that Mr. didn't recognize Martin at all. It wasn't until he spotted the skull pendant hanging around Martin's neck. That realization finally hit him. Seeing the two men hesitate instead of fighting, the host immediately raised his rifle as a warning. Mr. reacted instantly. He hurled the broken spear in his hand with full force, and the host dropped dead on the spot. Seizing the chaos, a girl wrapped in iron chains rushed forward and threw open the cage holding the infected. With a deafening roar, the arena descended into total madness. Mr. gave a sharp command, then led Martin and the chained girl as they fought their way out. The three of them soon reached a remote wooden cabin. Hidden traps were built into the wooden steps, a signature move that could only belong to Mr. Inside, Mr. brought Martin in, and the two finally caught up, talking about everything that had happened over the past 10 years. Martin swore he would take revenge for his wife and daughter, but Mr. warned him not to act recklessly, because that female infected wasn't just intelligent. She could command every other infected. Worse still, she was the spiritual leader of the Brotherhood. To them, an intelligent female infected was the ultimate form of human evolution. You have to understand, the Brotherhood wasn't some random cult. It had evolved from the bandit gang that existed 10 years ago, and by now, it had become one of the most powerful forces left in the world. Even if Mr. and Martin worked together, there was no way they could shake a monster this big. Martin was filled with frustration and helplessness. That's when he noticed the girl lying on the floor, the one still wrapped in iron chains. After asking about her, Mr. finally explained. She had grown up alone in the wilderness, with no parents and no protection. That kind of life had left her mentally unstable. But despite that, Mr. clearly cared deeply about her. In fact, the only reason he had willingly entered the arena was to rescue her in the first place. Suddenly, footsteps echoed outside the cabin. Mr. immediately sensed something was wrong. He hurriedly pushed Martin and the chained girl into a hidden passage, then quickly disguised the room. Just seconds later, members of the Brotherhood kicked down the door. By the time Martin crawled out of the tunnel, he could see from a distance. Mr. had already been captured and taken away. Luckily, the chained girl's sense of smell was far sharper than normal. She could roughly track where Mr. had been taken. But what they didn't expect was to find him tied to a wooden cross in the open wilderness. This was one of the Brotherhood's cruelest punishments, leaving enemies to die slowly from hunger and fear. Unfortunately for Mr., his luck was even worse. A high-level infected had locked onto him, but in a twist of fate, the creature's brute strength slammed straight into the wooden post, knocking it over. The moment his feet hit the ground, Mr. twisted with all his strength and snapped the infected's neck with both legs. But before Mr. could even catch his breath, another infected came charging in from the darkness. Mr. desperately struggled free from the ropes, but it was already too late. The creature's sheer strength punched straight through his abdomen. Just as Mr. was on the verge of death, an arrow flew out of the darkness and struck the infected down. Martin and the chained girl had arrived just in time. However, Mr.'s wound was still pouring blood. To prevent infection, the only option was to cauterize it with extreme heat. After weakly muttering the location of a survivor settlement, Martin pulled out a flare and, without hesitation, pressed it directly against the wound. By the next morning, the female infected leader learned that Mr. had been captured. She immediately rushed to the wilderness where the cross stood, only to discover that Mr. had escaped. Consumed by rage, she killed one of the Brotherhood's lieutenants on the spot and ordered everyone to split up, no matter the cost. They were to hunt Mr. down and bring him back. Meanwhile, Martin was resting with Mr. deep in the forest. He decided to head out and gather some firewood nearby. But not long after he left, 3 members of the Brotherhood showed up. The moment they spotted the chained girl, their true, savage nature was revealed. Luckily, Martin made it back just in time. And even though Mr. was badly injured and unable to move, he didn't hesitate for a second. He pulled the trigger and instantly took down 2 of them. The last one panicked and ripped off his hood. To everyone's surprise, he was just a kid. Mr. softened for a moment and chose to spare his life. On top of that, the boy kept begging, saying he'd been captured by the Brotherhood and forced to join them. Not long after, The three of them finally reached a human settlement. The white-bearded elder there was openly hostile toward anyone connected to the Brotherhood. But the moment he saw Mr. His attitude completely changed. As it turned out, the two had known each other before the outbreak. Even though many years had passed, their bond was still there. After learning that Mr. was wounded, the elder swore he would do everything possible to save him. Passing through guard posts built from barbed wire, the group finally entered the core area of the settlement. Surprisingly, they even had full-time doctors. After surgery, Mr.'s injuries were no longer life-threatening. As long as he rested for a while, he would recover. Meanwhile, the captured Brotherhood member was locked away in a small dark cell inside the settlement. The white-bearded elder proudly showed Martin around, introducing the settlement's facilities. Inside one of the cabins, there were actually 2 generators, powerful tools used to defend against infected attacks. Martin couldn't understand how they managed to pull that off. The elder simply chuckled and said Martin would understand soon enough. As night fell, everyone gathered together, venting their anger at the Brotherhood's cruelty. It turned out that every resident here had suffered at the hands of the Brotherhood, but because they were weak and outnumbered, they had no choice but to hide away in this remote place and survive in secrecy. As he spoke, the white-bearded elder suddenly stood up in rage. He was ready to go take it out on the captured prisoner, but to his shock, the bastard had already killed the girl who brought him food and escaped. The elder immediately ordered everyone to stay alert. And then, in the very next moment, a pickup truck smashed straight through the camp gate. The female leader had arrived, bringing an entire army of infected with her. It was obvious the escaped prisoner had run back and revealed the settlement's location. Yet surprisingly, the white-bearded elder didn't panic at all. At a signal, someone switched on powerful ultraviolet floodlights. The infected's absolute worst enemy, combined with the guard's desperate resistance. The female leader was forced to retreat in frustration and order a withdrawal. Martin wanted to chase after them and finally get his revenge, but Mr. grabbed him and held him back. Even though the settlement had won the battle, they still lost 6 people. And unbelievably, the escaped prisoner was captured once again. Martin couldn't help but feel regret. He should have killed that bastard earlier. The white-bearded elder told him to wait. Maybe they could still squeeze some useful information out of him. After all, everyone was wondering the same thing. Why would the female zombie leader set her sights on such a small, remote place? Before the prisoner could say a word, Mr. stepped forward and revealed the truth himself. That female leader was a brand new type of infected. Not only did she possess intelligence, she could also reproduce. About a year ago, during a chance encounter, Mr. personally killed her child and even stabbed out one of her eyes. That was why she had never stopped hunting him. Mr. even suspected that the massacre of Martin's family had been orchestrated by her from the very beginning, all to use Martin as bait, to draw Mr. out. Martin said nothing. Instead, he poured all of his rage onto the captured prisoner. Realizing that the female leader wouldn't let this go, the white-bearded elder immediately began organizing an emergency evacuation. Everyone grabbed whatever supplies they could and fled toward the mountains behind the settlement. Only Mr. Martin and a few others stayed behind. They weren't just seeking revenge on the female leader. They also needed to buy time so the others could escape. The white-bearded elder and several of his men chose to stay as well, standing together to defend the camp. Worried that the chained girl might be killed, Mr. tried to force her away, dragging her with a rope. Before they realized it, night had fallen, and just as expected, the female leader returned, this time with her entire infected army. But instead of launching an immediate attack, she stopped and waited where she was. Mr. and the others exchanged uneasy glances. None of them could figure out what she was planning this time. But in the next moment, a fanatical cultist appeared from the darkness, carrying a riot shield, charging straight into the generator room. He braved a hail of gunfire. With a deafening crash, the powerful UV lights went out. The only thing keeping the infected at bay was gone. Like a tidal wave, the infected poured into the settlement. Mr. immediately lit his incendiary rod, drawing the female leader's attention, while the others retreated to the strongest warehouse in the camp. Though the infected couldn't break in right away, their chance to escape had vanished. Meanwhile, Mr. had already lured the isolated female leader into the main hall. Martin, lying in wait, struck with a devastating blow. The two of them had set the trap long ago, but the female leader's strength exceeded all expectations. At the critical moment, Mr. risked everything, taking a hit to his body to gouge out her last remaining eye. Seizing the opportunity, Martin stepped in and delivered the finishing strike, finally eliminating the demonic leader. Elsewhere, the white-bearded elder and the others trapped in the warehouse were prepared to fight the infected to the death. When Mr. and Martin finally emerged from the hall, they were met with towering flames from the warehouse. The others had sacrificed themselves to clear the biggest threat and give the fleeing survivors a chance. Unfortunately, a few infected still slipped through. Down the back mountain, the chain girl, who had been worrying about Mr.'s safety, quietly left the group to check on him. But on her way down, she ran straight into an infected. By the time Mr. and Martin arrived, they saw her from a distance. The chained girl, already turned infected. Her face was twisted and grotesque, on the verge of full zombification. But even in that state, her instinct to protect Mr. kicked in, and she lunged at the incoming infected. She managed to take it down, but she was barely holding on. With tears in his eyes, Mr. personally sent the chained girl off, saying goodbye to her for the last time. More infected were closing in from behind, and Mr., already injured, could no longer keep running. Reluctantly, he bid Martin farewell, then gripped his battle axe, determined to clear the path one final time for the boy. It was just like 10 years ago, when Mr. first met Martin. Only now, he was far older, weary, and worn. By the time daylight came, Martin had caught up with the main group. He glanced back repeatedly, but that familiar figure never appeared. Then, a little girl approached, taking his arm, and together they continued moving forward. And that wraps up Wasteland 2. This sequel is noticeably weaker than the first, with plenty of moments that lower the stakes unnecessarily. But at least it delivers a full arc from beginning to end, enough to outshine most films of its type these days. That's it for today's recap. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to stick around for the next one.